This is a Chris Combs production.
Thanks for joining me today on Chris's Corner. This week has been a real eye-opener. As protests erupt around the country, we've seen how the focus has shifted many times across the room. One thing I've noticed is the increase of people who now hear the voices that say Black Lives Matter. I love it. It's a start down the right path. However, 3 weeks ago when Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, there wasn't near this level of support. Is it now that it's a cop that's involved that it's easy to openly condemn racism? Is it because we see the situation so often that it's easier to say that it's wrong? Ahmaud's murder was caught on tape, just like Floyd's. The only difference is the murderer was in uniform. See, it's easy to have this conversation in march and post memes when it's police brutality. But ask yourself, who are these cops? These cops are your brothers, your fathers, your neighbors, husbands, fiancés, and friends. Those are the people who are hardest to have these conversations with. Racism isn't taught in schools. It's bred in homes. It's not human nature to be racist. It's a nurtured behavior. Don't be silent and defend your friends dressing as Nazis, imposing in Nazi salutes, and defend their use of saying the word nigger, then come this way and say Black Lives Matter and that you stand with us. Call them out. Silence implies consent. This isn't some fad to jump aboard because it's the thing to do at the moment. Because you can't truly help until you want to understand. And if you truly want to understand, let your voice be louder for condemning racism than it is for condemning rioting and protesting when it gets ugly. Let's not be quick to quote and acknowledge that you understand what MLK was about and that he was against rioting while ignoring everything else he stated and stood up for. Martin Luther King was murdered for his views, assassinated. But what's an apparent little known fact is that the King assassination riots expedited the passage of the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Let me explain. After Martin Luther King was murdered, the United States saw riots and great unrest in over 100 cities, particularly Chicago, Baltimore, DC, Kansas City. They saw rioting, looting, arson, and protesting all over the country. This resulted in 40 plus deaths, 2,500 more injured, 15,000 arrested. President Johnson immediately spoke out denouncing the MLK assassination. And what he did, he immediately met with local governments, governors and mayors. He warned them against using unnecessary force, but he also felt like they weren't going to listen to him. So what did he do? He then met with leaders from all over, mayors, Supreme Court justices, civil rights leaders, and activists from all over, while excluding the radical groups. They all conceded that a socially progressive legislation will be the best response to the riots. He urged Congress to expeditiously pass the Civil Rights Bill of 1968. More specifically in that bill, the Fair Housing Act. Exactly 1 week after Dr. King's death in 1968, the bill was passed. Dr. King had campaigned for that bill, but was never able to actually get it passed. In the aftermath of his death, in response to civil unrest, after being stalled in Congress, it was passed by a wide margin. The very act that prohibits discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of housing that protects so many minorities across the board, not even just minorities, everyone. Protects people with disabilities, pregnant women. That very bill was passed in response to the rioting, the looting, the arson. So let's be cautious when we criticize and say protesting and rioting never solved anything, because history has proven that it has and it can't. The issue isn't with the protesters. Not at all. The issue is a lack of leadership. See, we've seen police chiefs and sheriffs join in with the protesters. We saw the effects of that. Out in Flint, he met them down, he took off his mask, he laid his baton down, he said, hey, we're with you. He asked them, what do you want us to do? They said, walk with us. So you know what he did? He walked with them. But where's our leadership? Where are the mayors saying that they're meeting with local police, enacting local reform? Where are the governors and state rep pushing for stricter oversight and restrictions, not just calling in the National Guard when things get out of control? Where's our president? Instead of just tweeting about justice for Floyd, what do you plan to do about a serious issue that's been plaguing this country for decades? According to his press secretary, President Johnson wasn't surprised by the riots. He said, what did you expect? I don't know why we're so surprised. When you put your foot on a man's neck and hold him down for 300 years, and then you let him up, what's he going to do? He's going to knock your block off. While I do understand the concerns of people who are affected by rioting and looting, I feel for you. I honestly do. I sincerely do. But there's a bigger issue at hand. If you're listening to this and your business is affected, I will personally donate to your rebuilding efforts when this is over. But right now, lives are being lost unnecessarily by those who are supposed to protect it. It's bigger than me and you. And when that change comes, I'll be right there next to you. And also, when we do get the change that we're hoping to see, that we're protesting to see, that we're using our voices to see, it won't just be for me. It won't just be for people of color. It'll be for everyone, just like the Civil Rights Act of 1968. Thank you for coming to my Chris's Corner today.